Welcome to the channel where we understand great works, not just read them. Today we enter one of the deepest and most moving works of ancient tragedy, Oedipus at Colonus by Sophocles. Around 406 BCE, near the very end of his life, the great Athenian playwright created this masterpiece as the final chapter in the suffering of Oedipus. This is not merely a continuation of the story of a fallen king. It is a story about the end of a long road of pain, about redemption, and about reconciliation with a faith that cannot be escaped. Imagine the scene. The road is dusty and long. Along it walks an old man. Once a mighty ruler of Thebes, he is now only a blind sufferer, dressed in torn clothes, broken under the weight of his own unconscious sins, the murder of his father and the marriage to his own mother. His only guide, his only eyes in the world, is his daughter Antigone. After years of painful wandering through Greece, father and daughter arrive at a small village near Athens, the birthplace of Sophocles himself, called Colonus. Exhausted, they sit down to rest on a stone in a dense and peaceful grove. But their peace is short-lived. A local villager approaches them with fear and anger. He demands that they immediately rise and leave because the ground on which they stand is no ordinary earth. It is a sacred place dedicated to the fearsome Eumenides, also known as the Eumenides, the goddesses of vengeance. Hearing this, instead of fear, the face of the blind Oedipus is filled with a strange calm. He refuses to move. Why? Because long ago, the god Apollo, the same god who had foretold his terrible fate, had given him one final prophecy, that his long suffering would end precisely in a place dedicated to these goddesses. Apollo had promised him that his final resting place would bring a great blessing to the land that accepted his grave. Oedipus knows his end is near. Soon, the chorus gathers around them, made up of the elders of Colonus. They too demand that the strangers leave the sacred ground. When they ask the old man for his name, he reveals his terrible truth. He is Oedipus, son of Laius. The elders are horrified. Afraid that his presence will bring a curse upon their city, they want to drive him away at once. But the old Oedipus is no longer the frightened man of the past. He proudly stands in his own defense. With a powerful voice, he declares that he is not morally responsible for his actions. He killed his father in self-defense, not knowing who he was, and the incest was committed in complete ignorance. Before the laws of justice, he is rationally innocent. He asks to speak with Theseus, the king of Athens, promising that his presence brings a divine gift. Impressed by his words, the elders decide to wait for the king. Suddenly, dust rises. On horseback arrives Ismene, the second daughter of Oedipus, bringing dark news from their homeland, Thebes. She tells her father about the betrayal between his sons. The younger son, Eteocles, has seized the throne and driven out his older brother, Polynices. Now Polynices is gathering a great army in the city of Argos in order to attack his own homeland. But that is not all. Ismene reveals a new prophecy. The outcome of the war between the brothers will depend entirely on where the grave of Oedipus will be. Whoever possesses his body will win. That is why Creon, their uncle and a Theban nobleman, is planning to come to Colonus. His goal is to kidnap Oedipus and bury him on the very border of Thebes without proper funeral honors, only to secure victory for the Thebans while avoiding his cursed presence inside the city itself. Hearing that his sons, who had done nothing to protect him when he was exiled, now want to use him as a mere weapon, Oedipus is filled with terrible anger. He curses both of his sons. He decides not to help Thebes, but instead to give his blessing to the people of Colonus, who have shown him mercy. To appease the goddesses whose sacred ground he has defiled, Ismene goes into the grove to perform a ritual of purification in his name. Then Theseus enters the scene. the famous king of Athens. Unlike the cautious chorus, Theseus represents justice, humanity, and democracy. He recognizes Oedipus, sincerely feels compassion for his misfortune, and without hesitation offers him protection and citizenship. In return, Oedipus offers him the greatest gift of all, his own dead body. He reveals to Theseus that his hidden grave will become a mystical shield, an eternal protection for Athens, bringing victory in every future conflict with Thebes. Theseus, with deep respect, accepts the gift, promises him safety, and leaves. But the peace is broken. The cunning Creon arrives. He begins with sweet, hypocritical words, pretending sympathy and begging Oedipus to return home. But the old king is not naive. He exposes Creon's manipulations and lists all the wrongs Creon has done to him. When kind words fail, Creon reveals his true, violent face. Coldly, he reveals that his men have already captured Ismene in the grove. Then he orders his guards to tear Antigone by force from the arms of her blind father. His blackmail is brutal. If Oedipus wants to see his daughters alive, he must go with him. The chorus tries to stop the violence, but Creon threatens to drag Oedipus away as well. Then, at the call of the elders, Theseus appears. The Athenian king is furious. He harshly condemns Creon for violating the sacred laws of hospitality and the justice of Athens. Theseus immediately sends his army, which quickly defeats the Thebans and rescues the daughters, returning them safely into the arms of their father. But the drama now reaches a new peak of pain. Theseus tells Oedipus that near the altar of Poseidon sits a man, a suppliant, asking to speak with him. It is Polynices, his older son. At first, Oedipus feels such deep disgust that he refuses even to hear his voice. But the noble Antigone persuades him to give his son a chance. Polynices falls to his knees before his father. Seeing his torn clothes and his blind eyes, he weeps. He asks for forgiveness. He begs Oedipus for support in the war against his younger brother, saying that both of them share the same fate as exiles. But the heart of Oedipus is closed. He has not even a grain of mercy. With terrible, thunderous anger, he tells Polynices that he deserves every pain because he himself was the one who drove his father out of Thebes. In one of the most horrifying moments in ancient drama, Oedipus casts a bloody curse upon his sons. He tells Polynices, "You shall not take Thebes with the sword, nor shall you ever see Argos again. By your brother's hand you shall fall dead, and your brother you yourself shall kill." Antigone, broken by pain, falls before her brother Polynices. Through tears, she begs him to abandon the attack, to dismiss the army, and to save his own life. But Polynices is too proud. Blinded by the desire for power and honor, he refuses to turn back. He says farewell to his sisters and walks straight toward his certain death. Suddenly, the sky opens. A powerful storm, with thunderous crashes, shakes Colonus. For everyone present, this is a terrifying storm. But for Oedipus, it is the voice of Zeus, the highest god. This is the call. The time has come. And then a miracle happens. The blind old man, who until that moment could not take a single step without Antigone's help, is suddenly filled with divine strength. He rises. He, the blind man, now becomes the guide, leading his daughters and King Theseus toward the secret place of his death. What happens there? We learn from the words of a messenger who breathlessly comes before the chorus. He tells how Oedipus performed the rites, bathed himself, and poured sacred waters over his body. He tenderly said farewell to his daughters, thanking them for all their love and suffering, and asked Theseus to swear that he would always take care of them. Then Oedipus ordered his daughters to leave and not look back. For only King Theseus was allowed to witness his end and know the exact location of his grave. That secret was to be passed down only to the heirs of the throne so that Athens would remain safe forever. The messenger says that when he turned from a distance to look, Oedipus had simply vanished. There was no trace of him, and King Theseus stood there, covering his eyes with his hands as if he had seen something too terrifying, too holy, some blinding divine light. The gods, after all his suffering, had finally accepted Oedipus. He did not die in pain, but in a mystical radiance, finding absolute peace and redemption. Theseus returns to the scene, accompanied by the weeping daughters. Antigone, desperate after losing the father to whom she had devoted her life, begs Theseus to show her the grave, wishing to die there beside him. But Theseus, faithful to his sacred vow, reminds her that this place must remain an eternal secret for the good of all. Understanding the greatness of her father's sacrifice, Antigone accepts her fate. She asks Theseus for one final favor, to take her and Ismene back to Thebes. She knows what terrible bloodshed is being prepared between her brothers, and she hopes that, even if it is impossible, she may somehow stop the war. The chorus comforts the girls, telling them to dry their tears. For Oedipus, the cursed one, the rejected one, the blind sufferer, has finally found his home. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Close the book. But keep your mind open. Understanding is just the beginning. I'll see you in the next great work.